With the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, our neighbors next door at East Lutheran Church are having a party. And one of the things that they're going to be doing in the Lutheran Church is putting on these red vestments that honor that anniversary, the Reformation Sunday. So as we open our hearts and minds to the Scriptures today, from the Gospel of Matthew, let's be thinking about that Reformed and Reforming church. Hear these words from the 22nd chapter of Matthew, starting at the 34th verse. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had left the Sadducees speechless, they met together. One of them, a legal expert, tested him. "Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law?" He replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. You must love your neighbor as you love yourself. All the law and the prophets depend on these two commands." Now, as the Pharisees were gathering, Jesus asked them, "What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he?" "David's son," they replied. He said, "Then how is it that David, inspired by the Holy Spirit, called him Lord when he said, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand, right to my right side, until I turn your enemies into your footstool'? If David calls him Lord, how can he be David's son?" Nobody was able to answer him. And from that day forward, nobody dared to ask him anything. This is the word of God for the people of God. God is still speaking. Thanks be to God. Would you pray with me? Most loving and gracious God, on this day of remembrance and celebration, call our hearts to your church, that we would not only reflect, but look ahead. Help us to see with your eyes, as much as you deem possible, the vision that you have for this world, starting with where we are right now. So may the words of my mouth and meditations of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. For the last few weeks, we've been walking through the first 5 books of the Hebrew Scriptures, what Christians might call the Old Testament. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They make the Torah for our Jewish neighbors. The Torah gives us the backstory of Moses. It tells us about Moses freeing the Hebrew people from bondage under Pharaoh in Egypt, delivering them into the wilderness where they receive the law that will guide them as God's chosen people, and on to the promised land where our friend Moses can go no further. How do all of that and the passage from Deuteronomy that Allison read a moment ago with all of those wild names and locations connect with today's lesson from the Gospel of Matthew? Well, despite this testimony from the Torah about all that God did and all that God promised to do into perpetuity, the people are still forgetful about who they are and whose they are. So what we've been talking about for the last several weeks. The Pharisees in the temple are experiencing what our evangelical siblings in the faith call spiritual amnesia. And what nostalgic faith does is it leaves us desperately grasping for certainty to prop up our belief system so that we won't have to deal with our fears. The legalistic Pharisees need certainty about their place in society, about their place in the world, about the assurance of their salvation, but certainty, beloved community, is an idol. Certainty is idolatrous. And certainty is what draws the factions of power around Jesus to undo him. There in the temple, he has been met by the chief priests, the elders of the people, the Pharisees, the Herodians, the Sadducees, and they have all tried to entrap Jesus, but one by one, Jesus has thwarted them at every turn, flipping their questions on their heads with eye-opening perspective. Jesus summons them and us back into the mystery of faith, where we put God first, and where we put our need to be right and certain all the time in the back seat. As the Women's Bible Commentary on the Common English Bible writes, we are once again invited to leave the safe shores of certainty for the adventure that is the life of faith. That's what Jesus invites us to do. As many of you know, there's a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old living under our roof. And they have been asking their parents questions for years now that threaten to undo us because we don't have ready answers. Why does the display say that the podcast you're listening to is 63 minutes long and not an hour and 3 minutes long? Why do they call it home of the 12th man if the 12th man is the fans in the stadium and there are women who go to the games too? Why is football so violent? Why is there an aisle in the party supply store just for girls and an aisle just for boys? What does God look like? If Jesus is God and Jesus died on the cross, does that mean that God died? So when the kids ask me those questions, I could try to be like Calvin's dad in Calvin and Hobbes and come up with some answer. Some of them I could consult Google about. But the best answer that I can give them is I don't know. I don't know is liberating. I don't know tears down to certainty and delivers the kids and me both onto this level plane of mystery. It liberates us into the adventure that is the life of faith. And isn't that the blessing and challenge of being a Christian? Isn't that what it's all about? Now back to the temple. Jesus isn't a licensed preacher. He hasn't passed the Pharisees' legal test of orthodoxy. He's no authority figure by any way of credentials in that temple, but Jesus knows what it means to be a Jew. When he's asked by a legal expert for a certain answer about which is the greatest law, he replies, love God with your entire self and love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on that. That's at the heart of it. Richard Swanson says that the legal expert asked a "do you have a clue about being Jewish?" question. And Jesus' response proves that he knows all you need to know about being a Jew. So the question for us is, do we have a clue about being a Christian? And are we certain about that? Or are we faithful? There's a junior in the Friends Church youth group, our own Lucy Harper, who is the vice president of the A&M Consolidated High School's GSA, Gay Straight Alliance. And on her gracious invitation, I spoke at a GSA meeting recently about being a Christian clergy ally to the LGBTQ community in the Brazos Valley. I suppose being an ordained minister gives me some kind of authority on explaining Christianity. But I wanted to know from them, what do you think that it means to be a Christian? And so I asked them. And one of the 30 or so teenagers in the room said, it means that you show Christ by example. And another one of them said, it means that you show compassion. It means that you love. That gets to the heart of it. So if the Christian church is allegedly on the decline in America, where did we go wrong? As I mentioned before, October 31st marks 500 years since an Augustinian friar named Martin Luther hammered his 95 Theses to the door of the Castle Church of Wittenberg. It was an act of protest against the Roman Catholic Church for selling indulgences. The church was saying that when your loved one dies, their soul is stuck in purgatory, that waiting room between heaven and hell, unless you pay for an indulgence, and then the loved one's soul would break out and ascend to paradise. Martin Luther said, that's bogus. You can't charge people money to earn God's favor. You can't exercise authoritative certainty to manipulate the rich and to exploit the poor in the name of God. You can't use money to pit people against each other. What Luther was saying with those 95 Theses was that faith is not about earning God's favor. It's about being thankful for what God has done for us in Christ Jesus. So thankful that we love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and we love our neighbor as ourselves without even thinking about it. It's that simple. But not really. I don't know about you, but loving my neighbor isn't exactly easy. I can't always summon the will of my brain to tell my heart to love someone who does me wrong, or who does my loved ones wrong, or who does my neighbors wrong. But here's the good news. when Jesus says that all the law and the prophets hang on our ability to love, he's not talking about love as a feeling. He's talking about biblical love. Love that is rooted in his Jewish formation from the Torah. It's a kind of love that results from self-discipline. Biblical love is what comes from a lifetime of honoring the laws and the prophecies of God so that our feelings are transformed over time to look like God's love for this whole world. It takes time. It takes commitment. It's what biblical commentator Douglas Hare calls a stubborn, unwavering commitment. A commitment is something that we choose to do with our brain, and the results of that commitment set our heart where God needs it to be. Think of it on this Reformation Sunday as our commitments leading it to the ongoing reformation of our heart. The Reformation was a protest that led to the Protestant church. And our commitments of time and talent put the protest back in Protestant. Pastor Trent preached about this last Sunday where he said, the stewardship of our resources is an act of resistance to the powers that be. When we pool our resources here, he said, we are using Caesar's currency to subvert his reign. Yes, there's the social justice. But stewardship, our commitment of money and volunteerism to God and to one another in this place, is also an act of resistance against this world's attempts to shape our heart. And there's the spirituality. Stewardship is us committing to a way of living, to a way of being that transforms our hearts away from a culture of shaming and blaming and dehumanizing and dividing to the point that we let go of fearful certainty about status and stature and security, and instead we love without conditions, without questions, without flinching. And when you love, you have no idea where God is going to take you. It's an adventure. On the 500th anniversary of the Reformation, we are committing to the ongoing reformation of our hearts so that we can get to the heart of being Christian. And if the church is the people, not the building, if the church is the people, then our hearts need to be in the right place. Or it'll be the voices out there who know more about being Christian than we do. Those who've been hurt and scorned by the church, those who've been told by a church that is more complicit to the culture of this world than to the way of Jesus, that they are no good, they will pound messages on our door through social media and slam poetry and protest in the street that say to be Christian is to love. Where did you go wrong? For the last 500 years, the church has made tremendous strides in being reformed, and our denomination, the United Church of Christ, has taken the lead in these Reformation efforts in many cases, ordaining the first African American, ordaining the first woman, ordaining the first openly gay person to the ministry, speaking out and acting out against Islamophobia and racism and nationalism, becoming the first Protestant denomination to support gender equality in marriage, committing to long-term disaster relief efforts, and on and on. We're a united and uniting denomination in accordance with the ecumenical call to be a reformed and reforming church. And we have so much more reforming to do. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. In her book, Men Explain Things to Me, Rebecca Solnit writes that domestic violence is the #1 cause of injury to American women. Of the 2 million injured annually, more than 500,000 of these injuries require medical attention, while 145,000 require overnight hospitalizations, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Spouses are also the leading cause of death for pregnant women in the United States. Domestic violence is one of the most insidious symptoms of patriarchy. Jacqueline Rose writes that patriarchy thrives by encouraging women to feel contempt for themselves. Well, the Christian church has been complicit to patriarchy for centuries. We have so much more reforming to do. In his book, Unfinished Lives, that investigates suppressed memories of LGBTQ hate crimes victims, Reverend Dr. Steve Sprinkle writes, 9 times out of 10, the justification given by those who kill LGBTQ people is rooted in religion as mediated by the rhetoric of theological hate. We have so much more reforming to do. And finally, in his book, Tears We Cannot Stop, A Sermon to White America, Reverend Dr. Michael Eric Dyson writes, if enough of you, one by one, exercises your civic imagination and put yourself in the shoes of your black brothers and sisters, you might develop a democratic impatience for injustice, for the cruel disregard of black life, for the careless indifference to our plight. Only when you see black folk as we are, and imagine yourselves as we have to live our lives, only then will the suffering stop, the hurt cease, the pain go away. We have so much more reforming to do. So let me tell you a quick story to illustrate why it's so important for us to commit to our time and our money to reforming our hearts. See, we may think that our hearts are in the right place, but we have so much more reforming to do, no? After that GSA meeting where I talked to the students, my brain was nitpicking at the negative and about the things that I was unsure about. I do that. I wondered whether any of them were really paying attention. I wondered if it really mattered that this middle-aged dude was talking to them about Christianity and the LGBTQ community. Their generation gets it, after all. We're the ones who have it wrong. I mean, it's great that we're an open and affirming congregation, but so much of that has to do with making up for the mistakes of the church's past, while today's young people are moving on ahead of us. Why commit to this when young people are leaving this in their rearview mirror? That's what I was thinking. But that night I checked my email on my phone one more time before I went to sleep, which is usually a mistake, but not this time. The email that I received said, "Hi, Reverend De Leon. I was one of the kids at the Consol GSA meeting today. I just wanted to personally say thank you for speaking at our meeting. I come from a very conservative Christian family, and every single adult in my family is very homophobic and hateful. So I've struggled a lot with denial and fearing I'll go to hell because I'm bisexual. I really appreciated being able to actually see and hear the opinions of someone from the church without feeling scared or attacked. I truly wish I could attend some of y'all's services, but I don't think my family would appreciate the proposal. However, I'll likely be attending A&M in a few years, so maybe I'll see y'all once I move out. Anyway, I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to thank you because it really did mean a lot to know I don't have to choose one community or the other, the LGBTQ community or the Christian community. Have a nice night." And I held up my phone to Stacy and said, "This is why we do what we do." Beloved community, the Torah begins with creation, but it doesn't end with destruction. It ends with God's promise. That's the mystery that we're called to live into. It's the adventure of our life of faith. And along the way, we don't know who we're affecting, who we're touching, who needs us, who is being transformed, but we can't not exist. We can't let negative thoughts that need certainty hinder our commitment to what we're doing together in this place. The gospel message of Jesus Christ can't not exist. The heart of Christianity is necessary. It matters because we matter. We are a reformed and reforming people. And what we are called to do is to go on an adventure. We just got to commit to it. And God will take care of the rest.